On this episode of This, That, and All Things Cinema, there's quite a few things going on with Netflix as of recently. Hello and welcome to another installment of the This, That, and All Things Cinema podcast. I'm your host, Brian David Rogers. I get the feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of editing with this podcast installment, mainly because I have such a cough. But anyway, without any further bit of blah 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 filler whatever, let's get started on the movie news. Let us start with Terminator Dark Fate. It is a film I personally am looking forward to seeing. It's, I believe, coming out this weekend or super soon. I honestly thought the trailers for Dark Fate definitely do look impressive. It definitely looks more. The best way I can describe the trailers for Terminator Dark Fate, it feels more real in a way. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, imagine Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day being kind of like this whole ground in reality. Well, as far as ground in reality as you can go, with time travel and robots that are made of basically liquid metal. And then you take Terminator 3, which tried to one up it but failed. Terminator Salvation, which I honestly haven't seen, so I'm not going to comment on it. And then Terminator Genesis, which was kind of a joke. It was awful. It really was. I rented it when it was available at Redbox, and I really just. I texted one of my friends right afterwards being like, don't watch Terminator Genesis. It's awful. Having said all that, I am at least curious about what they're going to be doing for Terminator Dark Fate. And one of the big selling points for Terminator Dark Fate is the return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. Up to this point, she only appeared in Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day, brief mention in Terminator 3. According to the article I'm reading this off of, there was like a voiceover in Terminator Salvation. And then in Terminator Genesis, she was played by Emilia Clarke, also known as Targaryen, Targaryen in Game of Thrones. Apparently, according to director Tim Miller, it was like one of those big things where he wasn't sure if Terminator Dark Fate would be the same, kind of the same story without Linda Hamilton reprising a role of Sarah Connor. He ended up talking to Screen Rant about this, and I'm going to read you the exact quote. Quote, we had a really brief time where we talked about other options before we said, well, what if Linda comes back? Because that's the optimal thing. And once we started talking about that, we didn't talk about anything else until Jim had an answer. So we all just kind of followed. Because if Linda says yes, then that drives a whole bunch of decisions. And if she says no, then you have to do something completely different because there's no world in which anybody else played Linda Hamilton. So all roads lead to Linda, and I don't know what was beyond them. Probably nothing. I probably would have off and quit if she didn't do it. I should have read the full quote before actually reading it out loud. Well, I try to keep this podcast not so colorful. I'm probably gonna have to like censor it or something when I am editing this together. But it's definitely interesting to hear that Tim Miller, who's directing Dark Fate and previously directed Deadpool, he probably would have dropped out if Linda would have just been like, yeah, no, I'm not interested. I'm half curious now about what Dark Fate would have looked like if Linda Hamilton said no, but honestly, I should at least wait and start hypothesizing the what if BSs after I actually go see Terminator Dark Fate for myself. And this is something I've been contemplating, and I just want to throw this out there. I was thinking of possibly doing like a spoiler-filled discussion of Terminator Dark Fate for an installment of This, That, and All Things Cinema podcast. But I've honestly been kind of going back and forth about it. If you think that's something you would be interested in me doing as an installment of the This, That, and All Things Cinema podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a like so I know for a fact that that's something you'd be interested in me doing. Or if you just came across this link because I promoted on Facebook, then like a comment that post saying, yeah, I'd be up for that. So just let me know. But let's change things a little bit tonally for a second and talk about the Avengers. Primarily Avengers Endgame. It is no surprise that Avengers Endgame was massive, barely making the top in the box office of all time. And you have to admit, it's not that often we get films that are 3 hours long anymore, and it didn't feel like a single moment was wasted. Although, in my experience when it came to Avengers Endgame, is I ended up missing a little bit of it. So by the time I got into the theater to see it, it was like about a minute before the 5-year time skip. I still haven't gotten a chance to really see what happens up until that. So with it out on Blu-ray, maybe I should get around to doing that. But the reason I bring up Avengers Endgame today is because yesterday I found out that, okay, this is a website called For Your Consideration. It's where studios promote some of their films to be considered for Oscar nominations. And last year, Marvel Studios had their first film being nominated for Best Picture, being Black Panther, and of course winning a few of the technical awards. I think it also got a score, if I recall correctly. It's been a while, and I probably should have done my research. Note to self, actually do research in the future. But the reason I bring this up is because there has been Avengers Endgame has officially gotten for your consideration posters, and I only discovered about it like yesterday as I'm recording this, because I record the day before I release it, so it's like, okay, found out Wednesday, recording Thursday, launching Friday. And here are the nominations that Avengers Endgame is doing for your consideration, or Disney is doing a for consideration for Avengers Endgame. Best Picture, Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, Best Film Editing, and Best Costume Design. In all honesty, this makes a lot of sense to me why they're approaching like the technical awards or some of the lesser creative awards when it comes to Avengers Endgame. Because I don't think that they would have a snowball chance for screenplay, because, I mean, as much as this well-written time travel is really a mess of a thing to actually implement. Best Actor and Best Actress, the film is really an ensemble piece, so I think really singling out a single individual for Best Lead or Best Supporting would be kind of, I don't know, it just wouldn't feel right to me. I definitely feel like they should at least throw cinematography in there, even if they don't personally feel like, because I mean, there's a lot of well shot moments, and then of course, Best Visual Effects is really something that they should be pushing for, because all the different VFX techniques that they had to do to be able to pull off Endgame like they did, it's a culmination of everything that the VFX companies learned, such as Industrial Light and Magic, for example, that they learned from doing VFX for Marvel Studios since the first Iron Man back in 2008. I still find myself being at a bit of loss, to be honest, because it really does feel like this era that led up to, like, we're kind of in a new era now as far as comic book films are concerned, because Iron Man kind of started the craze. The Avengers really made it show that it really does have all kinds of potential, and now with Avengers Endgame, you could easily say the sky's the limit. That's kind of how I feel about the whole thing. But how about we just switch gears over to talking a little bit about Netflix? Because right before I started recording this installment of the This, That, and All Things Cinema podcast. Netflix launched the trailer for The Witcher, which is based off of the book series of the same name, based off the video game series of the same name, with Henry Cavill, I think that's how you pronounce it, at playing the title character. And it shows some pretty interesting moments, with him being able to do magic, sword fighting, and just an exploration of this kind of scenery. Of which is it a series? It's probably a series, knowing Netflix is going to be a series, where the series takes place in. But at the same time, I kind of felt like something was off, and maybe it's just how saturated the witch's eyes were, how yellow and saturated the witch's eyes were. Okay, I know that's kind of a thing in the Witcher games. I'm not that dense. But with such a desaturated look, I know it might have been an intention to make the yellow eyes really stand out, but at the same time, part of it's just like, and it's probably a good thing since that was what was drawing my attention 100% of the time. Every time his eyes were open, it's just like, yep, those eyes are yellow. But yeah, and it did include in the trailer that it's gonna be coming out in December, so I might give it a watch. So who knows? Lastly, and this is the thing that has me the most excited out of everything I talked about on this episode of the podcast. Netflix has finally approved a mirrorless camera for their original programs or their original films. Up until this point, if you wanted to shoot a Netflix original, like if Netflix was hiring you to shoot an original for them, whether it be a film or a series, you basically had to use like high-end cinema cameras. Like we're talking Reds, we're talking Arris, and some of the cheaper cinema cameras like the Blackmagic 4.6K, the Canon C300 Mark II, but, and this has to be at the moment, the cheapest camera that Netflix will allow you to shoot their originals on. It's the Panasonic S1H. That's right, the $4,000 camera that it can shoot at 6K at 24 frames a second, 5.7K at 30 frames a second, and 4K at 60 frames a second 10-bit is on the approved list. But there is a few small caveats that you have to follow if you're going to use this particular camera on the off chance Netflix actually hires you to shoot an original for them. First off, it has to be at either DCI 4K or Ultra HD, which the small difference between them is just like the DCI 4K is slightly wider than Ultra HD. Like we're talking the difference between 1.85 over 1 and 1.78 over 1. You have to shoot in Vlog, which comes pre-installed in the S1H. And you have to shoot at the highest codec you can with the camera, which is 422 10-bit at 400 megabytes per second. And if you wanted to shoot at 60 frames a second using this camera, you kind of can, but you have to use its uncompressed HDMI output to an external recorder. Still has to be at DCI 4K or Ultra HD. Still has to be 422 10-bit, but you have to use an external recorder. Which chances are for a typical setup, you are going to have like at least multiple external monitors for clients to view, for a video village to view. And depending on if you're using like a Steadicam operator and how they prefer to have it set up, you might want to actually set up a monitor as part of the counterweights. Having said all that it's still pretty cool to me that you are going to be, that the realm of possibility, if you're offering to shoot like a super low budget Netflix original, it's there now. I mean, yeah, chances are there aren't going to be that many aggregators at this point where if you wanted to shoot a Netflix or shoot something on your own and actually try to pitch it to Netflix, yeah, like that's going to happen. But if you're one of the talented filmmakers that Netflix decides to hire, well, and you're used to shooting with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, you could easily, in the meetings, you could be like, okay, I want to shoot on the S1H. And they were like, okay, that's on our approved list. We'll be fine with it. Okay, I've never actually had any interviews with like Netflix or anything, so I'm not sure how it goes, or if it's like they have to talk to like production teams, or if it's solely on the execs being like, you have to use one of this list of cameras, or whatever the case may be. But it's still pretty cool that a consumer, okay, I can't really call the S1H a consumer grade because it's like $4,000 for the body only. That's not including the extra batteries you're going to need. That's not including the recording media you're going to need. That's not including the lenses you're going to need. For that price, if you're doing something on your own, I still would be like, okay, rig out a Blackmagic Pocket 6K. But that's just me. But those are my thoughts on sticking to it. This is going to be it for this episode of the This, That, and All Things Cinema podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. My name is Ryan, and I'm out. Peace.